Well, I think we can get started. Good morning. My greetings to all of you, including those who I saw last year and those who joined us this year. So my greetings to all participants of annual forum Our Money in Politics version 2.0. Today we will have an opportunity to discuss the first actual steps being taken in terms of implementation of legislation aimed at struggling against political corruption. We are going to discuss the first experience with the signs plus and or minus and think over further steps and make conclusions with respect to how efficient we are currently taking certain steps or measures to speed up real political competition in politics of Ukraine. So let's commence our forum. In the first part thereof, there will be the following participants: U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Ms. Mary Yovanovich, Chief of Central Election Committee, Mikhailo Okhendovsky, Deputy Chief of the National Agency for Corruption Prevention, Ruslan Radetsky, Representative of IFES Ukraine, Georgy Kobachidze, and Director of NDI in Ukraine, Mary O'Hagan. My greetings to you, dear participants, and first, the floor is given to U.S. Ambassador Ms. Mary Yovanovich. Please. Good morning, dear guests. Dear guests, I'm happy to greet you today at this event.
In politics. I'd like to thank our partners at IFES and NDI for organizing this event and for helping Ukraine to address a really important issue. The regulation of political finance is just critical everywhere around the world, including in the United States. Financial resources are necessary to raise awareness of an issue and make people aware of the positions of particular candidates, but they can also change results and influence decision-making of elected officials. So the legal framework for political finance should be organized in a way that balances these considerations and suits the political context of the country. There is no one perfect framework. It needs to be geared to each country. And I have to say, Ukraine, to its very great credit, has done enormous work in this area. With legislation enacted in 2015, Ukraine now has one of the most progressive legal frameworks for political finance in Europe, and I'm sure that also means in the world. It includes transparent and accessible financial reporting systems, contribution limits, as well as public financing for parties that meet popular and gender-based thresholds. This reform can be a major step in strengthening Ukraine's democracy. You'll notice that I said it can be, because as always, the key is going to be implementation. The initial steps are very promising, thanks in large part to the dedicated work of the NAPC, and thank you for your efforts there. And, you know, I can't stress this next point enough. Vigilant oversight is needed. That's why USAID's new project is designed to support Ukraine's political parties and civil society watchdogs in ensuring that political finance reform succeeds. Elected officials, civil society, political partners, regulating agencies, the courts, and the media all have a role to play if Ukraine is to ensure that money does not allow undue influence in Ukraine's election processes. This is an important part of Ukraine's anti-corruption and reform agenda. And so the United States government is very pleased to continue to support the Ukrainian people as they implement these innovations. So I thank you again for the opportunity to join you today. I really wish you a lot of luck. This is an important element of the way forward, and implementation is going to be key. Thank you very much.
Дякуємо, пані посол. Спасибі.
Thank you, Ms. Ambassador. Thank you. Now the floor is given to Mikhailo Okhendovsky. Central Election Committee. Good morning. Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Ambassador, dear ladies and gentlemen, attendants of the forum. Today I have a great honor to greet all participants of today's forum, arranged by the representative office of IFES Ukraine jointly with other organizations. First of all, I would like to thank separately the office of IFES in Ukraine for long-lasting cooperation with the Central Election Committee for many years and for comprehensive aid received by the Central Election Committee in this area, in the area of financing of political parties, as well as other areas in which the Central Election Committee is operating. Thanks. So, all of us who are present here now are aware of the fact that last year the government of Ukraine made an important steps for approximation of Ukrainian legislation with regard to propaganda of political party to approximate European standards. On October the 8th, 2015, we adopted the law on amendments to be introduced into certain laws of Ukraine on counteraction to corruption in politics. Today we have a great opportunity to assess how efficient new norms are used in practice and what are the further steps to be taken to further improve legislation of political parties financing and what problems are encountered by different political subjects in course of implementation of this legislation. So these are the topics of our event. As you know, the law envisages a range of important novels in our legislation, including annual state financing for political parties, at the same time limitation of private contributions from individuals and legal entities to support political parties. In the long-term prospect, that will enhance financial independence of Ukrainian parties. Annual state financing in the amount of 10% to political parties which achieved the level of women's representation among members of parliament that will provide for more efficient women's representation in parliament. Next, transparency of political parties, because today voters and parties will have access to property, sources of income of different parties, the ways of financial spendings and the financial obligations of the parties. Also, control over financing of political parties for the first time in Ukraine as an independent body, National Agency for Counteraction to Corruption, which has sufficient organizational institutional resources to take advantage of the authority granted by law. Regulation of financing to political parties during elections of members of parliament and elections of the president. It's important to highlight that new approaches to regulatory framework on political financing takes into account recommendations from the state regarding struggling against corruption and also the practice of the Bureau of OSCE and Venice Commission in terms of transparency of financing in Ukraine. We all remember that adoption and enactment of the new legislation was one of the conditions to liberalize the visa regime between Ukraine and EU. Today, Ukraine has already fulfilled its obligations, and we hope that in the nearest time, Ukraine will see the changes in the visa mode between EU member states and Ukraine. At the same time, we realize that the question of political financing in Ukraine requires further improvement because the practice of application of certain norms has already underlined some problems. I hope this forum will give us an opportunity to develop further steps and actions to improve legislation of political parties financing and what amendments may be needed in the nearest future so that all subjects of those processes could apply those norms, and so that the legislation could be used efficiently just for the purpose it was adopted for. Even today, we can talk about the necessity to switch of financial reporting by the parties in electronic form. That will minimize breaches, systemize information, and perform thorough state and public control, civil society control over the elections. Because I think that the main controller in this area is not the government, it should be the society and organizations of civil society, which are supposed to track how state funds are used, for what purposes, and whether there are certain transgressions by the political parties in this area, and whether the goal of utilization of those funds meet the needs of civil society development in Ukraine. We also need to pay attention to the system of administration penalties for breaches in reporting. We understand that the existing level of fines for non-submission of reports, it is 6,800 hryvnias, apparently are not incentivizing accurate reporting. Next question is excessive financing to perform agitation. It's not a complete list of the problems which need regulations on different levels, including legislative level, but apparently the efficiency of the acting legislation will be determined by efficient operation of the regulator in the area of political financing, which is the National Agency for Counteraction to Corruption, and also including the bodies of central bodies of executive authority, the audit chamber, and Central Election Committee. I think Alexander Stanislavich will correct me if I am wrong. The State Agency and the Central Election Committee have already established a fruitful cooperation pattern. We are ready to work in this mode in the future, and jointly with our colleagues. I think the Central Election Committee is the body which has been existing for over 20 years, and Ukraine is ready to continue providing to the colleagues from State Agency of Counteraction to Corruption, is ready to provide comprehensive assistance in all areas of our activities, starting from operation of computer networks, which are used by both agencies, and finishing with cooperation on mundane basis on those areas which are typical for us, as assigned to us by the laws of Ukraine. This is it, I think. All those who are present here, let me wish all those fruitful and constructive work. Thank you, Mikhailo. Without any diminishing of the role of the Central Election Committee, we need to admit that I think today it is the anniversary of NASK. So, Mr. Ruslan, the floor is given to you. Mr. Ruslan Radetsky, of the National Agency. Good morning, dear colleagues. If you don't mind, on behalf of my agency, I would like to thank you for your invitation and the opportunity to take part in this event. Yes, National Agency is one of the most advanced actors in the area of public finance, and we have fruitful cooperation with the Central Election Committee. Now, as for the reforms in the area of political finance, it provides proper grounds for regulation of the role of financial funds in politics in compliance with the world standards, and change of the role of industrial and financial business groups. Financing of political parties is not trusted by Ukrainians, in particular in process of joining political parties, and they are not ready to support political parties with their contribution of charity payments. The social quizzes show that even new political projects are losing their trust from Ukrainians. Those parties are not able to meet the framework, and they cannot meet the expectations of the citizens. And also, efficient state control over parties' finance and provision of state financing of the parties is a novelty for Ukraine. And that makes a difference between Ukraine and other European countries. So I think this is a new high quality step. And this is recognized by OSCE, Venice Commission, and Greco Group. Control over financing of political parties and their campaigns, as well as distribution of funds between political parties, the funds assigned from the state budget for their core activities, it's one of the key competences granted to the state agency for counteraction to corruption. For transgression of that law, there are criminal and administrative liability envisaged. In most of the countries of the world, annual state financing is given not to all registered parties, but only to those which meet certain criteria. So, last year, 6 political parties were given that right, that financing. Along with that novelty, the new legislation increased the requirements for the parties, limitation in terms of contributions for support of core activities performed by the parties, and they envisaged reporting on assets, expenditure, and sources of financing of political parties, besides provision of finance from the state budget. Implementation of our functions is enhancing the role of the regulator in the system of state finance, decreases lack of regulation, and changes the phenomenon of political parties, which has been there in the place for 25 years of our history. At the same time, jointly, it enforces internal parties' progress and development, and also judgment of the political party by new young people full of energy. And also, I would like to emphasize that electronic declaring is one of the main key theses of.
Because this is one of the key points of the national agency, we would like to inform you that we have already started verifications on timeliness of submission of e-declarations. Because the e-declarations, they are also discipline the public agents who participate actively in the activities of the country. Thank you very much. You basically have described the domain for our working discussion for today, and I would like to give a floor to the organizers of this event. And now I would like to give a floor to Georgi Kabahidze. Від імені
in politics. I'd like to thank the United States Agency for International Development, Global Affairs Canada, and the United Kingdom for their continued support. It is through their support that today's event, as well as our ongoing work to promote a more participatory, transparent, and accountable political process in Ukraine, is made possible. Today's gathering, as was mentioned, comes just 1 year after the passing of the landmark political finance reform law. While it is still in the early stages of implementation, the law creates a true opening for tangible progress. In order for Ukraine to reap the full benefits of this reform, all stakeholders have an important role to play and must fully engage in the process that is now underway as participants, regulators, and watchdogs. Moreover, it is important for international and national actors to continue to build on the ongoing and future work in a coordinated manner in order to increase the effectiveness of the work and of our goals. With this in mind, in the spring of this year, IFES, together with civil society, government regulators, and other international bodies, developed a comprehensive political finance strategy document for Ukraine. The strategy, which now provides a framework for coordination, takes into account experiences from other countries that have experienced similar transitions, and it discusses specific tailor-made activities that need to be implemented in Ukraine in 2016 and beyond. In early 2017, IFES will facilitate a stakeholder review of this strategy, taking into account conclusions from today's forum, as well as developments over the past year. Parallel to this, we will continue to work with our partners at the Central Election Commission and the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption, as well as civil society and media, to further strengthen the implementation of the current regulatory system while being mindful of other aspects of the law or implementation that can be further improved. This could include a shift to electronic reporting for political parties, harmonization of the regulatory system with other electoral laws, and more effective sanctioning mechanisms. In closing, I would like to underline the perhaps obvious fact that building transparency and improving the regulation of money in politics does not happen overnight. It is an evolving process that at times does take a delicate balance between vigilance and constructive oversight on the side of media, civil society, and assistance providers. A process in which effective regulation is of course key to transparency and control over the role of money in politics, but not at the cost of pluralism and political activity. Thank you.
Дякуємо. Дякуємо, Георгію. І, будь ласка, ще організатори нашого національного...
Thank you very much, Georgi. And now I would like to give a floor to Mary Uhagen. She is the CEO of NDI in Ukraine.
The ambassador in particular has to go in a few minutes. I'd like to, first of all, say hello to everybody and be very grateful that everyone has made the time to be here. One of the unique features of this forum is that so many different sectors with a different role to play in these issues are all present together and able to look at the issues in tandem. I'd like to associate myself with all that Gio said. We very much appreciate our close cooperation with IFES, and we're very grateful to all the donors in this field who support our work. I'd like to also mention Sweden on the gender side. I think that when Gio talks about the work IFES is doing, maybe I can just add a few words about the sectors where we're focused, the compliance, help with compliance for political parties, supporting civic activism in this field, and working on the gender components of party finance reform. This is sometimes seen as a kind of Cinderella component of this, but actually what Ukraine now has is the first concrete incentive for political parties to play their role as gatekeepers in a more inclusive way, and that's going to be a crucial component of Ukraine's transition and adoption of European values. And I'd just like to finally mention a couple of things. On research, you'll see a slide on the wall over there. It's in English on that side and it's in Ukrainian behind me. These are the results of focus groups conducted with Ukrainians across the country earlier this year. This is how they describe political parties as they are today, dominated by the influence of oligarchs and representing themselves as opposed to the general population. This is how Ukrainians, no matter which party they support or what their aspirations for the future might be, this is how Ukrainians see parties in general. But they are also able, next slide, to describe in great detail and with enormous unanimity how they want parties to behave. They want citizens' interests represented. And as these reforms are implemented and begin to have the desired results, that, I hope, will be the outcome. That in a few years, when we ask Ukrainians how parties behave, we're going to see far more people saying that they represent the interests of citizens rather than the interests of a small clique of donors. Thank you very much.